Make your comeback stronger than the setback. Today on the Level Up Life, Muscle and Mindset Mastery, we're joined by someone who lives that truth to the fullest. Brandon Hillaker battled through nearly a decade of mental illness, a brain injury, in the darkest valleys of the human mind, and still came back to chase purpose with fire. Now he's a triathlete, psychology student, and the force behind the Try for Hope, a mission to show the world what's possible when pain meets purpose. From swimming across Lake Michigan to stacking medals in honor of the years he struggled with mental health, Brandon's story is real, it's raw, and it's relentlessly inspiring. So let's get into it. Brandon, welcome. Pleasure to have you, man.
Yeah.
I'm excited to share your story with our listeners. So let's start with as far back as you want to go. Just tell me a little bit about yourself and some of your struggles.
All right. First, I want to thank you both for letting me come on the channel, and spread my message.
Yeah.
I really appreciate
man.
this opportunity. Thank you. So usually when I explain things, I take it all the way back to the beginning. A lot of times when you tell a story, you got to start from the beginning. I was born with ADHD. And the way I explain it is the mismanagement of a neurological problem, ADHD, led me to develop borderline personality disorder at a very young age. When I was 14 years old, having ADHD, childhood trauma, and borderline personality disorder triggered my first manic episode of bipolar 1. So when I was young, 14 years old, and you're feeling the intense emotions from bipolar, I acted like a child would when it's in pain or in discomfort that did not have the vocabulary to express the feelings that I was feeling. So I would scream and act violently, erratic behavior, because I didn't have the words to describe what a manic episode was, those emotions that I was feeling. And for a long time, people in my life, teachers and everybody, I was labeled the trouble kid, would tell me what I can and cannot accomplish in life. You're going to go to jail, you're worthless, you're stupid. And that was the life that I thought I could only be, a troublemaker, that person. And that's exactly what happened. So I went to jail and I ended up winding up in prison. I went to prison boot camp down in...
Been there.
Yeah, right? You were
Chelsea, Michigan,
Chelsea,
SAI
Michigan,
boot
right?
camp, yep.
And I was like 20 or something when I got out, and I knew I had to do something different with my life. So I was on parole, and I got out, and I moved away from my hometown to get me away from that, the whole birds of a feather thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to work at a tattoo parlor down in Lansing for a while, and my childhood dream, as long as I could remember, is I took welding in high school, and I heard there's this one student that was in my welding class said that he was going to the Navy to be an underwater welder, and I was like, that just sounds cool, I was like 15 when I heard this. So it was always my dream to be an underwater welder. So when I got off parole, the first thing I did was move to Florida.
No, underwater welding
underwater
is really
welding.
dangerous, isn't
Yeah.
it? Because you're working with electricity and underwater, right?
Yeah.
It's arc welding.
Yeah, so it's stick welding. And a lot of people, like when we talk about it, we have this conversation, I say it's underwater welding. But what underwater welding is only like 10% of the job, right? Like I was an underwater plumber or an underwater construction worker. If I worked in the Gulf of Mexico, if something needed to be constructed, an oil rig, pipeline, something like that, that was my job. Ball valves, oil pipelines, all that stuff. Underwater welding is a very small portion of the job, and I did do quite a bit of it. We do a lot of underwater burning. So the easiest way to explain it is I was an underwater welder, but I was really a commercial diver is what I was. Right. And like I said, I decided to do this to get a new start of life. And I had no idea that the lifestyle that I was trying to run away from and get a new start was the lifestyle that I was running directly into the arms of. Is because being a commercial diver, a lot of us had a few screws loose, right? Like it's like taking a bath and throwing a toaster in it. Right? You're playing with some big, heavy machinery. A lot of times you can't see your hand in front of your we wear big helmets. You can't see your hand in front of your visor, like your lens. It's really dangerous. And we would spend weeks in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico, make a lot of money, and come in. I lived 2 blocks away from Bourbon Street. And that was just asking for trouble. Pocket full of money in Bourbon Street with a bunch of crazy guys.
No.
So that lifestyle that I had it made the bipolar like worse and worse, more triggers, living that adrenaline-filled lifestyle. I got into a lot of self-medicating with alcohol, drugs, cocaine, and it made the bipolar worse constantly. Then I ended up joining the motorcycle club, which only exacerbated that because now I have this ego that I'm a big bad biker, and it just fueled. It was just gasoline for that fire, So I did that for about 10 years, and then in 2012, some life events happened. My best friend passed away in a car accident when we were arguing about something stupid, I got fired from my job because I wanted to go to the funeral instead of going offshore to the Gulf of Mexico. And then a hurricane hit down in Louisiana and took everything that I owned. So that triggered a manic episode.
What hurricane was that?
Oh, I don't remember.
You don't remember? Okay.
It wasn't like a Katrina or anything. It was a small one, but it was big enough. I lived right on the bayou at that time. So I moved out of Bourbon Street, away from Bourbon Street. I lived right on the bayou, and living right on that water, all that water went into my apartment. It took everything out. So now that triggered a manic episode. I didn't have my purpose, right? I got fired from my job. My best friend passed away. I was self-medicating. I was driving everywhere I could with a motorcycle as fast as it could go. Just living that I don't give a shit attitude, I went manic for 5 months, and in January 8th, 2013, after drinking all night long and partying, I walked into the house and I saw a means to the end, and I acted on my suicidal thoughts. My friend found me and called 911. I don't remember any of it. My heart stopped. They brought me back. I don't know when. I laid in a coma for 2 weeks at the hospital. And it was very, it was crazy. When I woke up, I had severe brain damage. I had to learn how to walk again, talk again, communicate to people. My brain would think of the words to use to talk to you guys, but it took a long time for the signals to come to my mouth and say these words. I had to quit my job, move back to Michigan. And when I moved back to Michigan, it was just a daily fight against my mental health. That overdose just made my bipolar worse, right? And it was intense for a long time.
So describe because I'm not bipolar, but so I'm trying to understand what does being manic feel like in that moment when you're having a manic episode. What does that feel like?
Yeah. So really there was 2 major things going on with my mental health. One, I had borderline personality disorder. Borderline personality disorder it's a lot of things. It's a very complicated thing, but it boils down to you develop borderline personality disorder by going through some type of trauma, right? And then you start setting in negative coping skills to deal with trauma, right? So as a child, I didn't really have the ability to learn empathy, right? Because I had to survive. It was survival skills. Mm-hmm. I had to protect myself. So the borderline personality disorder would often trigger the bipolar. So when I would have one episode, it would trigger the bipolar. Bipolar, we'll call two types. There's bipolar 1, which is manic, like you get the manic high.
Mm-hmm.
Bipolar 2, you get the manic low. With me, try to explain this. You get an emotional trigger in the brain, right? So say something happens in life, and it can be good or bad, right? Anything. You can get a raise. And it's a situation that happens in life that triggers an emotion in the brain that your brain can't bring really down to baseline, bring you back down. So like when you get super excited, I get super excited. When you get super excited, you get excited, and then you come back down to baseline in a little while. I just keep going up and up and up once that's triggered. It's hard for me to like come back down to baseline. So the manic, and what it is, it's the research that I've done is that it's like the overfiring of the neurons in the body that overfires dopamine, BDNF, hormones, cortisol, all these things. So it's like a flood of these neurotransmitters that cause these emotions. So you go manic, you go really, really high, and then you can stay elevated for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 5 months. And then what happens is that just shuts down. It stops overfiring all that. And you just crash into depression. And during a manic episode, you can't sleep. Like you're wide awake. It's like being on coke, dude. And you can feel it kind of like, I don't know, it's you can literally feel it. It's intense. It's exhausting is what it does.
Yeah.
It's exhausting. Yeah. Like imagine being on a bender for a month, right? Of that high, that cocaine or that meth high where you're just like getting it, right? For example, I'll tell you a story.
And you can't come
down, right?
Is there a fear involved with that? Like when you're in it and you
No, when you're in it, you're it's a lot like when I am manic, it's like I'm in the back seat of a car and someone's driving that has absolutely no life preservation skills. Right. And like, I'm just like holding on for dear life as this person, you know, the unconscious part of me is just grabbing the wheel and surviving. And I'm screaming in the back seat, like, what is going on? You know? And yeah.
Sounds really scary.
Yeah. So like one time I went manic and I was what they would be a runner. So I would go manic and I would sell everything I owned and leave, right? So like one time I went to Detroit, you know, those little scooters that you can rent on the side of the roads.
Mm-hmm.
So I rented one and I was going down the road and I crashed it, right? And I went flying off of it, landed on the pavement, screwed my whole body up. I was bleeding everywhere. There's gravel in my face. You don't feel anything. You just pop back up, jump on another scooter, and you go. It's like a Superman. Like you don't, one, your brain's going so fast and so rapidly, and you have so many rapid thoughts that you can't process the pain that you're going through because it happens and your brain's already on a different thought. You don't have time to process what's going on. It's just like, go, 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 go.
Right.
It's intense.
Sounds very intense.
Yeah.
So when that happened for 5 months down in Louisiana, I just walked in the house and I was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't. It's hard, you know, being a commercial diver, being a biker. My brothers weren't like, Brandon, what's going on in your life? Are you thinking about suicide? You know, like at the time, that language back then, one, mental health's very stigmatized, especially in men. Men don't really talk about mental health, you know? So
I'm sure it's, and maybe I'm overgeneralizing here, but maybe it's worse in those biker clubs too.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think just in like for men in general and skilled trades, you know, like,
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
what was it? Just a couple years ago, I'm trying to think, Secretary of something said they made it was a state of emergency for suicide rates increasing in the skilled trades. So like construction skilled trades, welding, like that type of stuff.
Yeah.
That it's increased so much that they actually were like, this is a state of emergency. We got to figure out what's going on here. So that was just a couple of years ago.
Yeah. And I mean, especially in the patch, right? You're knowing a lot of the other guys that were offshore. It was 28 was a lot of their schedules that were working on the rigs. I was 14. You're spending more time with those guys
Right.
than you are with your family or any other situation. Right? And that, yeah, I mean, you have big brothers and you have guys that operate as kind of dads and stuff. There were times where my position, I would teach, but your patience only lasts so long when you work with these guys for 12, 13 hours. Then you live with them, the other ones, right? I mean, there's a whole lot of testosterone. There's a whole lot of, you go lay down, right? Because the patience ain't there. And you have moments where you look out, but on the overall, absolutely not.
Right.
You're not asking people like, are you feeling okay?
Right. No,
are you
like
struggling with
a lot-
something?
a lot of times like that. I mean, like with my crew, with my people, it was like, how did we solve problems? We go to the bar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We want to sit down and have a conversation about our feelings.
There's moments of it, but you're still, I mean, you're hanging out.
Right.
So it's not you're even to open up. I mean, you might recognize, and, hey, what's wrong? And it's more, there's your answer. Yeah. Let's go get messed up.
Yeah.
Right. And it's that because it wasn't a lack of caring from the majority of people. At least, I can't speak for the golf and all that, but at the same point, I mean, it's that testosterone's running through. They try and be an HR world, but it's not an HR world out there, right? I mean, it's, it's not being gentle. Hey, will you go get this, please? I don't care how sideways I get with you telling to go get me that pipe wrench. If you don't get it and I have to get it myself, it's not going to be good for you.
Yeah.
Like that's the mentality. Yeah. Time is money.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's very suck it up, buttercup.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a whole lot of things. I was trying to chew my tongue on the wording.
Right.
Would have, I had been spoken to me, and then, also in return, my responses are when I was the guy that needed that pipe wrench. I mean, yeah, there's no hand holding, right?
No, not at all.
So yeah, you probably, in that world, made it even harder.
Yeah. Yeah, it was intense, man. And then so after I moved back to Michigan, from 2013 to 2021, in the beginning, I still didn't have that, like I was talking to you about, the vocabulary, to express these emotions and these feelings. So in the beginning, when I moved back in with my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife. And I still didn't have those vocabulary skills to express the things that I was feeling. And I was going manic, constantly being triggered, constantly going to the doctors, constantly going to the inpatient hospitals, right? And I didn't even have insurance yet, Just got fired from my job. So a lot of things happened. For example, like in 2015, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer, right? And the doctor walked in and was like, he's like, by God, Brandon, you got cancer. I'm like, what? That's a trigger, right? So he's like, I'm going to give you this shot. The shot's supposed to like help with the cancer or something. And at the time, I didn't know anything about my disability. I let him give me this shot. Now that I know all the things that I do know, it was an anabolic steroid. You can't give steroids to someone with bipolar. There's a lot of things you can't do with bipolar. And it triggered another 5-month manic episode. I started hearing voices and went into like states of psychosis. I heard a news broadcasting in the back of my brain telling me play-by-plays. It was like people, like on TV5 or something when you watch them and they're all talking. And they were talking like a play-by-play of my life for days and days and days. And I couldn't take it anymore, right? So my wife was sitting on the couch and I'm standing up and I'm trying to explain the things that like are in my head, and I didn't have the vocabulary. So I just started screaming I saw a pair of scissors on the end table, and I picked them up and stabbed them through my hand, just to like. It was just that. It was a reaction, you know. That put me in shock, and I looked at my wife, and I was like, I gotta go to the hospital right now. I went to the hospital, and those voices lasted a long time, you know, and it was tough. It was tough, you know. Yeah. After that, like me and my wife got married. I got into cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, group therapy. And I was very medicated. I had a lot of medications. I went to all the best doctors. You know, I did all the things right. They put me on what they could. My hands shook really bad. I had tremors. I had extreme vertigo problems. So I had to walk around with holding my wife's arm because I would fall and run into things. I had lupus in my hand. It was very painful.
Was that medication related,
Yeah.
like side effects?
Yeah. So every time I went to the doctors, my wife had to go and like fill my paperwork out because I couldn't function, right? They had me on over 40 medications from 2013 to 2021.
Wow.
I'm not joking. Like, not at the same time, but 40 different ones. This don't work, we'll give you this. This don't work, we'll give you this. Right? Antipsychotics, mood stabilizers.
Or it's this prescription has this side effect, so we'll prescribe you this prescription to
for
deal
another
with that
one.
side
Right.
effect.
That's exactly.
But this one has this side effect, so it's like a domino effect. Of
My hand
prescriptions.
shook. They gave me a medicine for it. My lupus hurt. They gave me a medicine for it. Right.
Yeah.
And it was hard because my hand shook so bad, and food would fall right off my silverware.
Mhm.
And my wife had to feed me at the table. And I really want you to think about that. Like,
Oh yeah.
think about like your loved one having to feed you at the dinner table. Like, it was hard.
Or having to rely on
Somebody, right?
Just the impact for both people.
Yeah. Like, I went to a friend's house once. We had dinner, and I was shaking so bad that night the food was falling right off my silverware, and I was so embarrassed. I quit going to my friend. I couldn't eat with my friends anymore. You know, like, I was so embarrassed. And that struggle lasted a long time. And I went through all these therapies and stuff, but I was on a lot of medications, you know, and I couldn't even process my thoughts. And so I couldn't even process the therapy and these skills they were trying to teach me. So this leads until 2021, right? This was the turning point of my life. And it was we'll call it a happy accident.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to this party up in northern Michigan. And I really want to like emphasize what I'm about to say, though, for the listeners too. One, I'm not a medical professional, right? Two, you can have mental health conditions predisposition to die, like bipolar and schizophrenia your whole life. So what I'm about to talk about is dangerous, and make sure you do your research. This isn't just something that you jump into. So I went to this party up in northern Michigan, and it was like this happy hippie fest. And I was laying in my hammock, and it was nighttime. And this young lady came up, and she's like, "Do you want some mushrooms?" Yeah. At the time, I was researching assisted suicide in Switzerland and Oregon. Where could I go? Like, I was fed up. So I ate these mushrooms. And it wasn't a lot, but I didn't see little green men. I didn't see rainbows. I didn't trip. I was laying in my hammock, and I began to cry under the stars, and I felt like everything was going to be okay. Everything was going to be okay. The next day, I woke up. I went home. I told my wife what happened, all this stuff. So I went down this rabbit hole of just starting researching mushrooms. Like, why? I was chasing this why. Why did I feel that way? For the past 10 years, I've been absolutely miserable. I locked myself away. I had this closet in my garage. It was a 4x4 closet. And I set it up. I put a PlayStation, a DVD player in there. And it was like this little space that I could go and hide. And I gained all this weight, became very depressed. Like,
Your safe spot.
right, it was my say. I took my cat in there. Like, I lived in this room for years.
Yep.
life was not good. So when I ate these mushrooms and felt this way, I was like, why? So I started doing all this research, and I found out Johns Hopkins University and a lot of other major universities were researching psilocybin, which is the active molecule inside of magic mushrooms, and bipolar. And
I think they've done studies on depression treatment too.
And
Yeah.
PTSD for sure.
The VA is doing research with PTSD and stuff. There's a lot of research. And in the 40s and 50s and 60s, like psychedelic psychotherapy was huge. A lot of people don't know this, but I believe AA even started out with psychedelic psychotherapy. That's where it began. And it started getting abused. So I think it was Nixon, he made it illegal and got away from it. So I started doing all this research, and I started to learn about psilocybin, and I started reading research papers, and I didn't really understand them, but I got the basis of it. And a lot of the research that was being done was for bipolar 2, because they're afraid that, and it was for macro dosing, large amounts. And they were afraid that psychedelics can trigger the onset of a manic episode of bipolar, so they're not researching bipolar 1. But then I accidentally stumbled upon somebody called Paul Stamos, something called microdosing. And the difference between microdosing and macrodosing is macrodosing, you take a large amount to get high. You want that psychedelic effects, right? Microdosing, you take a very small, minute amount of psychedelics and you stack it with lion's mane and niacin. So I sat down with my wife and my doctor, and I was like, listen, we got two options. We're going to try something drastically different in hopes that it'll work, or I'm just going to try it. I'm going to act on my thoughts of suicide again. You know, like that's the way it's going to go. I got to do something different. What we're doing is not working. Mm-hmm. We've spent 10 years trying to medicate this. I'm in the hospital 4 to 6 times a year. I'm in partial hospitalization programs. I'm in full hospitalization. Like, what we're doing is not working. So my wife was like, okay. The doctor was like, you might go manic. You might end up in the hospital. And I'm like, that's fine. We're going to figure it out. So under doctor supervision, I started microdosing psilocybin and experimenting with psilocybin. And I came off one medication at a time. I believe I was on 5 medications, and it took several months for me to come off them because I did it under doctor supervision.
And they tapered you.
Yeah, when you come off medication, like the stuff I was on, antipsychotics and mood stabilizers, one of the worst things you can do is just stop taking it. Mm-hmm. You have to taper off of it.
Well, even antidepressants,
right?
Because I was on those when I was in the depths of my addiction, and I remember I was like, I'm not going to take these anymore. They're not helping.
Right.
And I quit cold turkey, and it was like little firecrackers going off in the middle of my brain, like pow, pow,
yeah,
for weeks, which, you know, obviously it should have been tapered by a doctor, but
right.
At that time I wasn't really even, you know, other stuff I was doing, that's probably one of the least risky things I was doing. So, but tapering's essential.
Yeah. You know, and that was the one thing, like I wanted to do this smart because I'm not a doctor. And that's why I wanted to do this under doctor supervision. I sat down and had a real conversation with this person. Mm-hmm. She didn't really know anything about microdosing, but she's like, I'll watch out for you. You know, we'll do this together. We'll figure it out. And that's what you need in a doctor. You know, that's that support of thinking outside of the box. There's so many different therapies out there. So I started coming off all these medications, and I was feeling really, really good. And then the hand stopped shaking, right? No more shakes. No more lupus. No more vertigo. I can write. I can fill out paperwork. I can eat food, right? Yep. I can ride a Harley and drive a car. Because when I came back, I couldn't drive. I couldn't ride a motorcycle. And so I was feeling really good in 2021. And I'm like, you know, like I'm on disability, and I didn't like being on disability. I didn't like sitting at the house all the time. You know, I was on the top of the game. I was a commercial diver, you know, like an underwater astronaut. I don't like sitting at home. So I talked to my wife, and I was like, I want to go back to school. And I toured Delta College. I met the faculty that did the welding program. I went and toured the welding program, and I was really impressed by the stuff they had on campus and the technology they had in their program. And I decided I was going to go back to school for welding. And at the time, I still had this mindset, you're only a welder. You can only be this. You're only a hands-on learner. You can only be a mechanic. You'll never go to college. I kept having this like in the back of my head. So the first semester, I took 18 welding credits. I pulled off a 4.0, right?
Nice.
Yeah. I was like, God, like I can do it. Like I'm off all my meds. I'm microdosing. I'm feeling good. I'm still battling some, like what I've come to realize is like the microdosing helps prevent the trigger. And if a trigger's big enough, I still go manic. But the microdosing helps prevent the trigger, right? So let me think. Second semester, I decided to take some educational classes because the first semester I had to write this paper on a welding rod, how a welding rod works. I've never done research. So the teacher was like, you need to go down to the library, talk to the librarian. He's going to teach you how to do research on the library, the Delta College database. So the librarian sat me down. She's like, you just type in here what you want. These are all peer-reviewed articles from professionals. How does a 70-18 rod work or 60-10, whatever I did that paper on. Wrote this really amazing paper, and then a light bulb came on. How does bipolar work? And thousands of peer-reviewed articles came before my eyes of questions I've been asking doctors for years. Every time I ask, how does bipolar work, they give me some answer out of the Diagnostic Statistic Manual, the DSM, right? No one's ever sat down and explained what's going on in my brain. Thousands of papers appeared before my eyes, and I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Print, and just started printing all these papers. How does psilocybin work? Print. Just started reading. Second semester, I decided to take some educational English classes, and see if I can do it. And I found that I really liked researching and writing papers. I was like, God, I'm kind of smart. Like I can do this, And something that second semester really impactful, that really turned my life, is I was talking to someone at campus, and I told them that I had borderline personality disorder and bipolar. And the response was, do I have to be worried about my other students in class?
Stigma alert.
Right? I'm like, I'm not a serial killer, dude. Did you watch Criminal Minds last night? Like, come on. So instead
it reminds me of like when people hear that, like that don't know me now, they hear that I was a heroin addict, they might hide their purse or their wallet,
Right.
Like, it's the same sort of stigma. Doesn't mean because I struggled, doesn't mean that I'm a danger or a risk to anybody.
Yeah. And that was like one of the first times that stigma really came out. That really like smacked me across the face. I was like, this is reality. So that switched my mindset. And that second semester, I got another 4.0, and I realized that I can accomplish goals. I switched my major to psychology, and I decided that I was going to break the stigma by doing some epic crap. That second semester, summer came, and I was like, what am I going to do all summer? There was a wall on the side, right outside the door of the welding department. There was a sign. It said Bay City Triathlon. I was like, what is a triathlon? Like, it's a big poster. And I scanned it, and it said 3-mile kayak, 12-mile bike, and 3-mile run. I weighed 290 pounds. I was like, I'm going to do this. I texted my wife, and I said, I'm going to do a triathlon. She says, are you manic? I'm like, no, but thanks for the support, because those are those things, like when you go manic, you have these racing thoughts, and you come up what they call ideas of grandeur. Yep. Going to Delta College was an idea of grandeur, So throughout many years, that was kind of a response from my wife. Are you okay? Like that's kind of a warning sign.
So let me ask you, how do you differentiate when you get those ideas of grandeur and when you're like, I'm setting my goals high because I'm going to achieve them? Like,
Right.
what's the dividing line there?
Right. That's so that leads me to everything that I'm talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that it's only an idea of grandeur because that person that thinks it's an idea of grandeur don't think that they themselves can accomplish that goal. Or because my racing thoughts are going so fast that I might go think of another thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
But all an idea of grandeur is a big goal. And if you focus on that goal and you give that goal everything you got, it's just a goal.
Mm-hmm.
So I talked to my doctor, talked to my wife, and I said, I'm going to run a triathlon. And for that summer, I trained vigorously, dude.
Yeah.
Like, I trained hard. And I got on and when I say like hard, not training now and hard training then was like run a half mile and feel like you're going to die. Right? That's training hard.
And
I can
then,
relate to that one.
Right? When you first started working out, remember back and you were like, oh my God, I can barely bench press 100 pounds or 100, whatever. It's like, this is hard. I'd get on the treadmill and run a quarter mile and I'm like, how am I going to do this? Every day I kept going back. And I reached out to a friend of mine that was a trainer. She was a trainer and a gymnastics coach. And she lived in another country at the time. And I was like, listen, I don't know what I'm doing. I need help. This is what I want to do. She's like, all right, I'll develop a plan for you. We'll do it. Pro bono. I'm like, all right. She's like, but you got to follow through. I'm like, all right. And the more I started training, the more I realized how expensive it was about to be. I didn't have a bike.
mm-hmm.
I didn't have running shoes. I had nothing. I worked at Delta College in this welding department making $10 an hour. Like, I didn't have money for this. So I decided that I was going to do a GoFundMe. You know, maybe someone will help me achieve this goal. I need shoes. I need a bike. And I started going to local area businesses to help me and saying, this is what I've accomplished so far. I went to school. Like, this is my past. I tell them my mental health journey, my struggles. And I had a lot of people support me. And I was able to get the shoes. I was able to work with Ray's Bike Shop to get a bike, you know, and achieve this goal. And during the training, something really happened. One of those happy accidents, right? I went and got a skin infection. And I don't know if it was from the pool or the jacuzzi, I don't know. I went to the hospital and they're like, it's a skin infection. They gave me a topical steroid. I rubbed it all over. I can use topicals, right? But not digest steroids. Well, it made it worse. So I went to another hospital and they're like, you got a fungal infection and you gave a steroid to a fungal infection. Covered my entire body. They're like, you can't train for a while. So I'm like, okay. So I didn't train and manic triggered. And that manic got worse and worse and worse. I couldn't go to the gym. I couldn't do anything. And I had this fungal infection all over me and it hurt. It was painful. It was about 2 weeks. It went away and I could finally go back and I was still manic. And I went back and I straight up tied one on. Like, I went to the gym and just like, at the time, you know, like, I don't remember what it was. I think I ran a mile and then I swam and I lifted weights and I biked. Like, I straight up like killed it.
Mm-hmm.
The next day I woke up and I was like, I'm not manic anymore. Why? I went to the library. How does exercise impact bipolar? Print. Peer-reviewed articles. How exercise affects bipolar, mental health, all this stuff. And I just started reading. And it wasn't a book. It was peer-reviewed articles. Like, this is science.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, all right, I get it. When I crossed that first finish line, I did the Bay City Triathlon. I crossed that finish line, I grabbed my wife, and I was like, when's the next one? Because I felt amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like a beast,
Awesome.
bro.
That's awesome.
This is like, when's my next one? Like, still to this day, just telling the story, every hair on my body, because it was like, it was an alarm in my brain. My brain was telling me what I needed. I needed this.
Mm-hmm.
This is working. Figure it out.
Right. Oh, it's big. I mean, that accomplishment. I
Right.
was talking about my brother-in-law and doing the duathlon myself. I mean, and when you were the half mile, because I still smoked and drank when I did mine. And I mean, I did pretty well, but I couldn't grab a gear to train. I had a $50 Walmart bike that I got the big, fat, slick mountain bike tires on in Petoskey. I passed one person on the bike. It was a lady who was about 75 years old. Other than that,
Did you cross the finish line,
Oh,
though,
yeah.
right? And when you
Absolutely.
got that medal, how did you feel
it felt pretty good.
that you did that?
Yeah.
And no one can take that achievement away
Yeah,
from you.
I mean,
you did that.
It's gear. And I mean, my wife, well, you're not into it. Why don't you just tell Scott you can't do it? Can't. What? What? And I mean, how well I could have done with training had my head been in it. Whoa.
Yeah.
But the whole running thing is not for this guy.
Right.
It was one and done.
Now let's take a moment to thank our sponsors, Pine Haven Assisted Living. At Pine Haven Assisted Living, they believe in making every resident feel at home. Nestled in the peaceful countryside of Hemlock, Michigan, they offer compassionate care in a family-like environment where residents can enjoy independence with the support they need. Registered nurse-owned and operated, their team provides personalized care, home-cooked meals, and a range of activities to ensure your loved ones continue to live a fulfilling life. They also have alpacas and llamas on site to enrich the lives of their residents. Experience the warmth and comfort of Pine Haven. Call them today at 989-295-6632. That's 989-295-6632. Or you can visit them on their website at pinehavenassistedliving.com. That's pinehavenassistedliving.com for more information. Now, back to the Level Up Life.
Running's hard. I love biking. I love swimming. In the beginning, running was very difficult. I was big. I have had knee surgeries. Running was very difficult for me. So it was kayak or swim that made me happy. Bike, that made me happy. Running was the challenge I had to overcome. Running was the challenge. And I really liked that medal. I was like, all right. So after I ran, I crossed that finish line. I knew right then, I was like, I can never stop doing this. So like I said, I switched to psychology and I took 2 more semesters at Delta College. And one of those happy accidents, my English class had a book called The New Science of Learning. And it was for students to teach them how to better educate themselves. And in this book, it talked about neuropsychology and how exercise impacts the brain to be a better learner. And that when you exercise before a test or when you exercise before homework, there's this thing in your brain called the BDNF. And BDNF is it's a chemical in the brain that helps you store and recall information. So after reading this, I started testing this. So every time I'd go to the testing center to take a test, I would go exercise, right? And then sometimes I wouldn't exercise. And I would see, like, is this real?
Mm-hmm.
It's real. Dude, if you exercise before you have to do your homework, before you have to take a test, before you do something like this that we're doing now, it'll make you smarter.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, it's still kind of trippy. Like,
Yeah.
you know,
Oh,
I
yeah.
never knew that stuff.
No, I didn't know it, but I believe it.
Yeah.
Well, and if you look at the basic human physiology, what society, where we went with it, is we're very sedentary.
Right.
Even these couches that we're sitting in we're not built to sit like this.
Right.
We're built to move.
Farm, hunt, and gather.
Yes. And so I think it's natural for our body, like when we move, it's natural chemistry in our brain, you know, all of the things just align better, right? So I know for my recovery, it's been huge. Vouch for him. I know a ton of people that have got out of depression.
Right.
And it does, like, his is weights, mine's weights, yours is running. It just move.
Moving.
Right? Doesn't have to be anything specific. It could just be move.
Increasing your heart rate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Endorphins. Get the endorphins kicking. Serotonin.
Yeah. So that, serotonin, right? So that brings me into this. So those 2 semesters, I kept researching, and I told myself a couple more things happened. I told myself, every paper I write, and I took a public speaking class, and every public speaking I did, I'm going to write about mental health because I'm just going to learn about mental health. That's all I want to learn about is the brain. How it's like my mental health is my enemy, right? So like if America was to go to war tomorrow, we would need to know as much as we can about our enemy to be defeated. Bipolar, right? And borderline personality disorder. So I started talking, researching and doing all these papers, and I public speak, and all these students kept hearing about mental health and mental health and mental health. Like I'm constantly talking about it. So all these students started coming to me and like tell me about their mental health obstacles. It's like, I got to do something about this. So I started putting together this idea to put together a mental health fair on campus. And I met the lieutenant governor and Dr. Gavin, the president of Delta College, like the first or second semester. And we talked about mental health. We talked about disability. We talked about the Michigan Reconnect program at Delta College. So I emailed Dr. Gavin and I was like, listen, I want to put a mental health fair together on campus. We're going to bring in mental health resources from the community. I said, these students are coming to me, talking to me about their mental health. They need resources to overcome their obstacles to achieve their goals, right? So we put it together, and we've had 3 so far. Mental health fairs at Delta College. We bring 30 mental health resources in from the community for a 2-day event, 15 on one day, 15 different ones on the other. We interview each one of the resources on a loudspeaker down in the cafeteria so all the students can hear what kind of services they provide the community. We record them, put them on YouTube and Facebook so the community now has access to them. And it's a hit. You know, it helps people overcome their obstacles. And then while we're interviewing them, you know, like I'll walk around the students and everyone in the cafeteria is talking about mental health. We break the stigma for 2 days to allow people a comfortable atmosphere, a safe atmosphere to talk about their mental health and to get those resources so they can overcome those obstacles. And that's been a huge hit, man. So I kept doing research and led me to last summer. And I was like, my wife's name's Lisa. And I was like, Lisa, I want to do another experiment. She's like, oh my God, what now? She's like, what are you talking about? I said, all these papers I'm writing say that I should be able to do enough vigorous activity to balance the imbalance without microdosing. I said, I'm going to do so much vigorous activity this summer, I'm not going to microdose. She's like, what are you talking about? I said, I'm going to sign up for 10 triathlons and I'm going to swim around Mackinac Island in 4 months. She's like, what? I'm like, bet.
Damn, boy.
Yeah. And I did it. I didn't microdose once. I trained hard, dude.
So are you, if you don't, a personal question, do you take medication now?
So I'm going to answer this with 2 questions.
Okay.
No, I am on 0 medications.
Okay.
I am not anti-medications. Medications do serve a purpose.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm not like the people listening. I'm not saying like quit taking your medicine and start microdosing, right? What I'm saying is what I was doing wasn't working. Right now, there are a plethora of mental health resources out there of different types of, there's so many different approaches to mental health. There's so many different therapies. And that if what you are doing is not working for you, don't lose hope and give up. Find something else that works. And if that don't work, find something else and find something else. Don't just go to a doctor blindly and say, give me medicine and make me feel better. If it's not making you feel better, find something else, you know? But I am not on any medication.
Exercise is medicine.
Right. So I did it was 11 medals for the 11 years that bipolar took over my life. And that was the whole like thing. And I did it, swam around Mackinac Island, and all those skills. Remember how I said that I've done cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy. I've done all these like different types of therapies. But at the time, I was on a lot of these medications, and I didn't have the cognitive ability to understand these new coping skills. Now that my brain is kind of free, I've been able to implement these coping skills, right? So we'll call it psilocybin presented an opportunity to kind of free my mind from the fog and to implement those coping skills and to balance the imbalance, right? If I did not go through cognitive behavioral therapy and dialectical behavioral therapy, and I only took the mushrooms, I would have just reverted back to the old Brandon with all those negative coping skills. I needed the therapy. I had so many negative coping skills that I reverted to constantly that I needed to override those with these positive coping skills of how to deal with situations, how we're supposed to deal with situations, you know? So it wasn't just the psilocybin. The psilocybin presented me an opportunity to like think, process, and implement these skills. And doing the 11 medals for the 11 years took every one of those coping skills, positive coping skills, because every one of those triathlons came an obstacle. And this is where resiliency comes in and obstacles. And I really learned something, a valuable lesson about doing those 11 medals for the 11 years, is that every day we have obstacles in our lives, big or small. They can come in all different shapes and sizes. And obstacles are not set in our lives for us to be like, I give up. They're set in our lives for us to overcome and learn the valuable lesson in that obstacle. So, for example, I did the Chesaning, it was called the Chesaning Dry Try, right? It was a kayak. I got my bike out of the car, started backing it up to talk to my wife. I tripped over the back tire. I fell on the bike and I hurt myself. I picked the bike up, looked it over. I was like, okay, the bike's okay. I fixed it, whatever was wrong with it. I called my coach and I'm like, something's not right, you know? And I have a new trainer now that does endurance sports. And Coach Maria, she's amazing. And I called her. I'm like, something's not right. And she's like, is this an obstacle you can't overcome? Or are you going to go do that triathlon? This is what you train for. You train, you've overcome these obstacles. Like, what are you going to do? Like, I want to do it. Did the triathlon. A couple days later, I went to my chiropractor. He's like, dude, you got 3 dislocated ribs. Right? We have to train every day to overcome obstacles, no matter what they are. Or else an obstacle is going to arise and be like, I give up, just like my mental health, my bipolar, you know? The following week.
They're cultivating, like, to overcome obstacles that happens up here.
Right.
Like you said, resiliency.
It builds resiliency.
But you gotta have some sort of a mindset to get to the point where you can. And I know for me, some of it was the therapy I went through. Some of it's been things I've been through that I've just, survived. Right. I'm like, I am a warrior. I can make it through this. I can make it through that. I can make it through whatever comes my way.
Right. Even when those alarm bells, like we were talking earlier, like, right, cold plunging is a good, perfect example. You get in 40-degree water, every bell and whistle in your brain's going off to get out, right? But if you override that and you say, you're sitting here, I'm going to stay right here. There's nothing you can do about it, brain. And you get through that, that's building resiliency, right? So like these obstacles that arise in our lives, your bells and whistles are going off saying, don't overcome it. This is dangerous. You can't do this. You overcome it. And that's where you get that resiliency, is just constantly overcoming obstacles.
So tell me about the Try for Hope. I know that I love that you're going from hell to paradise. I love that about it. And it's 400 miles, right?
Yeah. So when I did the 11 medals for the 11 years, I was like, I did the swam around Mackinac Island. It was like 9.5 miles. It took 8 hours. And I got out of the water and I just sat there like, I just swam around an entire island. And it was the greatest feeling I've ever had in my life. What's next? What's next? And I remember hearing about a motorcycle group that goes from Hell, Michigan to Paradise, Michigan. And I was like, there's water in between there. I can turn this into a triathlon. So I started researching if it's ever been done before. No one's ever done it. So this summer I decided to call it the Try for Hope. And it's 400 miles in 4 days. So I'll be biking from Hell, Michigan to Mackinac, which is 330 miles. And when I get to Mackinac, that's going to take 2 days. The first day I'm doing Hell 220 miles. And then the second day is 130 miles. The third day, I'm biking to what they call the Mackinac Bridge Swim. Every year it's an event. They have 300 to 400 people swim across the bridge. So I'm biking to that. I'm going to do the bridge swim. It's about approximately 4.5, 5 miles. And when I get out of the water, I run 65 miles to Paradise. I'm doing this in 4 days. Just show people, like the whole idea of grandeur thing. The reason people tell you a goal is impossible is because they themselves don't think it's achievable.
Or they wouldn't.
They want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not impossible. It's improbable.
And what people don't see is the work that you put in on a daily basis.
Right.
That's the hard part.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot. Training for this is a lot. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm achieving. How can I explain this? I'm achieving things that I never even thought were possible. So like last Saturday, I biked 75 miles. Went to bed, woke up, and then I went to the Shiawassee Refuge, and I ran 20 miles right after. Like, I'm just like, I'm 45 years old. I've been broken, and I can achieve these things. But it's your mindset,
Mm-hmm.
It's
100%.
impressive.
Yeah.
It's for sure impressive.
And it's 100% your mindset. And in my mind, it's not, I'm going to try to do this. In my mind, this is done.
That's
It's
the
done.
key right there.
I just got to go do it.
You believe
It's done.
100%
Yeah, it's
that
done.
you're able to do it.
Yep.
And I feel like that's the
Yeah,
biggest component is belief in self.
yeah,
That makes it possible. It's like my experience with starting business, becoming a trainer. I talked about everything my life is now 9 years ago in rehab, 8 years ago, 8.5 years, I think it was. And people didn't believe me. They're like, you're crazy. Then I had people a couple years into it, like this guy who, he believed in me. He's like, oh, you're going to be one of the greatest trainers in the Tri-Cities. You already are.
I was going to say, there was no gonna.
Yeah.
I don't remember that.
Yeah. So I believed, and then I had support with people around me that reinforced my belief in myself. So
yeah,
I was able from that point to just put in the work, right? It's just, I'm big on visualization, that type of stuff. You put in the work, which your training is the work, and then it's already done. Like you probably visualized yourself finishing in Paradise, running across your finish line, like
100 times.
big old smile. Like,
Yep.
look what like the overwhelming wave of accomplishment you're going to get in that moment.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine like what I can imagine it to some extent, but
I'm going to cross that finish line, and Lake Superior is 20 feet away. I'm running right into Lake Superior.
I was going to say,
So in my brain, I've pictured 100 times me crossing the finish line and just running into Lake Superior.
that's awesome.
But you said something that I really want to talk about for a minute. That there's this who is it? James Clear with Atomic Habits. He wrote that book, Atomic Habits. Yep. And he talks about when change goes against the tribe, change is looked down upon. Mm-hmm. When change goes with the tribe, it's, I can't remember the quote. It's like cultivated, right? It's looked, it's a positive thing. And in our lives, we're going to have two types of people. We're going to have the type of people saying, you can't do that. And you're going to have your friends that are like, you can do that.
let's
right?
go.
Let's go.
Let's go. And this is something that I have been very fortunate since I've started this journey. For example, my team, right? Going to Delta College is a huge one. The staff and the faculty have straight up cultivated that belief of this growth mindset that you can do this. You know, having people like Ray's Bike Shop that believed in me, that can see me finishing and crossing that finish line, that helped me achieve my goals. Having a coach that believes in me, that when I tell her that I want to do something ridiculous, she's not like, you can't do that, you're going to hurt yourself. She's like, let's do it. You know, having support. And something I learned about when I swam around Mackinac Island is that it's the people in your lives that we learn from their mistakes, and they cultivate us and they push you and they help you. And those are the people you got to keep in your life. The people that are telling you can't do it, you need to keep them at arm's length, right? And use that as fuel.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
And I went to a birthday party, and someone very close to me, I was telling them about this goal, and they're like, you can't do that. And I'm like, I'm going to call you when I get there, and I'm going to tell you that I just did it, and then hang up the phone. Like, what are you talking about? I can't do that.
Can't, never could.
Right.
Right.
Use that as fire. Those people that tell you you can't, use it. Gasoline.
So everybody listening, the people around you that have goals that, you know, they share with you, you can be the can't person, or you can be the can and help support them.
Right.
I think it's important to support people in their goals, right?
Right.
I think you should wear a GoPro, man.
So we're making a movie.
Yeah. I'm watching.
We're making a movie. So James Dagg is a film documentarian. He did one on Run Woodstock, which is a 100-mile ultra thing downstate. And he's already started process of filming. We've done, actually yesterday he came to Delta College and we got some like training shots for the movie. We're going to film the entire thing. It's going to be on Amazon, hopefully. And we're going to do a movie premiere in Saginaw. It's going to be super cool.
That's badass.
Yeah. And like I said, the whole thing is to show people that the impossible is only improbable. You know, like we can achieve improbable. It just takes hard work. And on my worst days in life, when I was dealing with my mental health, to get 1 minute, to be like, I can survive 1 more minute, was impossible, right? I self-medicated a lot of my symptoms, you know, like to think like, I don't need to go to the bar tonight, you know. To think that 1 minute, you know, like one day at times was impossible to get to, but it's not. You can do it, you know. So the Try for Hope is the goal for this is to raise money for Barb Smith's Suicide Resource and Response Network. The goal is $20 per mile to get me out of hell and get me to paradise, you know? I took Barb Smith's suicide assist training a couple years back, and it was a 2-day training, and I met Barb's organization putting together the mental health fairs. And when I took this training, it changed my life 100%. And like, I'll jump back on how we were talking about mental health in the skilled trades earlier, right? How I wish somebody in my circle would have sat me down and said, hey, you know, what's going on? This assist training gives you the skills to identify signs, and then to straight up teaches you the skills to say, are you thinking about suicide? Saying those words is very difficult. And then this training teaches you the skills to make a plan. Rather than freaking out and calling 911, make a plan with that person. Ask them why. Why are you thinking about this? Maybe they just want to talk. Maybe they feel alone and they don't have anyone to talk to. Maybe they just need someone to talk to.
Right.
And then ask them, do you have a plan? What is your plan? And if they have a plan, listen to it and say, do you have a loved one or a family member that I can reach out to that can take that plan away? Whatever plan that is. Can we get that out of that house? That training changed my life. So for example, like I want to show you this. Narcan.
Saved my life.
Saved your life. This is a life-saving skill, right? I've been a lifeguard for a long time, or not a lifeguard. I've been CPR trained for a long time being a commercial diver. And now I'm a lifeguard. And I carry this on me. This is a CPR face mask. And I carry it on me everywhere we go. Because you never know. You never know, right? This little piece of paper was from that suicide assist training. And when someone says, I want to kill myself. I have suicide, whatever the words are. This is piece of paper helps you develop that plan. This is just as important as this or as this. It's not more important. It's not least important, but they're all valuable tools. And that's what Barb's organization, this assist training, teaches you, is how to use this and how to have life-saving skills. And that's why I chose her organization to raise money for, and to bring awareness to, because I feel just like this, everyone should have this in your car. Everyone should have this in their purse and wallet, because you don't know when you're going to use this. I've been carrying this around for, I think, a year or two. I've never used this. I've used this. That doesn't mean it's more important or less important. These are all valuable tools that we all need to have.
100%.
So Barb's organization is super amazing. And that's her mission, and her team's mission is to end suicide. And, with my history being in the skilled trades, I wish somebody in my circle would have had that training and been like, Brandon, are you thinking about suicide? Maybe I would have said yes. Maybe I would have said, I have no idea. But at least I would have had the opportunity.
Right.
So with that, make sure you're checking in on your people.
Yeah.
I want to thank everyone for tuning in. Don't forget, click like, subscribe. Very important, check on your people. You never know what's going on. If they cross your mind, reach out. Thanks for tuning in.